Joining us on the program now from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, our Australian correspondent, Craig Heilmann. Craig, kia ora, thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, Andrew. Great to see you again, mate.
And look, Sunshine Coast living up to its name today. I can see blue sky, sunshine, palm trees in the background. The tropical paradise that you live in, right?
This is one of those fake Zoom backgrounds, I'm afraid. Normally it's just overcast and rainy. No, it's true. I mean, I'm going to sue someone for false advertising, brother. This has not been the sunny coast at all. It's been the rainy coast.
Now, we've got a bit of rain this side of the Tasman, of course, at the moment. Very serious for some parts of the country. There's power cuts and road closures and those sorts of things. I hear that there's been a bit of a crisis for you guys, though. The weather's been so awful that you've been running out of some pretty important goods in the local shops.
Unbelievable, mate. It's trouble in River City. There is literally, you go to supermarkets and there is nothing on the shelves. And it's all because with the flooding, the trains stopped for about 10 days. You know what the government trains are like. And they have been not delivering their butter and their cheese and everything. And literally you go into the supermarkets and there can be whole swathes of shelves empty. It makes you wake up and realize how utterly dependent we really are.
Wow.
Like we depend on our supply chains and systems. And if they're broken, man, it can go pear-shaped very quickly.
So a little bit of stockpiling, perhaps, from people that are going, well, I'm going to buy a whole trolley full of butter and cheese just in case the trains aren't playing up, but also the delivery has broken down over recent times.
Yeah, no, look, it's amazing what people will do when they think there's a crisis coming. So I don't know about stockpiling. It possibly has happened. I know it happened during COVID, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
There just seems to be a real shortage of a lot of different things. So, but it's quite funny when you go into a supermarket and you just see empty shelves. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, totally. Hey, some serious issues affecting Australia at the moment. Last time, of course, we were talking about the tragic, awful situation of the aid workers that were killed in Gaza. The Australian government's response to that. Your Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, getting into a bit of hot water. Her support for a Palestinian state. What's the story there, Craig?
Yeah, so as one writer over here said, it was very much a Jejun sort of amateur university first-year paper speech where she somehow thought it was important that Australia weighed in to say, hey, we should have, a Palestinian state beside the Israeli state. This has always been part of the Labor Party platform. It's one of the ways that they sort of fend off the left of their party, the crazy left wing of their party, is by sort of doffing their hat to it. But of course, no one ever takes it seriously. We know how hard it would be to have a two-state solution, particularly if Israel weren't on board with that. And part of the problem is, these guys are going to be living so close to each other with standing armies on either side of a wire fence. And with one side particularly wanting to kill the other side, it's not likely to really work out. I mean, how do you allow a genuine state to occur, which means arming itself and all the rest of it? Anyway, Australia, God bless them, has weighed into this through the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong. What it's really about, it just shows you how cynical our politicians are, because you know what it's really about? It's really about making sure they don't lose inner city seats to the Greens at the next election, because the Greens are even further left, obviously, than the Labor Party. So this is one way you can tip your hat to more Middle Eastern voters who might be in Australia and the real far left of their party to stop them voting Green at the next election. But it looks like our Labor government's headed toward minority government, with the Greens probably as their coalition partner, and that's going to be very interesting.
Now, of course, this is something which is very much hitting the headlines, and there are pro-Palestinian protests in just about every city around the world, including in Australia. But of course, there's also Israeli Jewish citizens of Australia as well. What's their response to this?
Yeah, so they're pretty upset. I think many of those people probably used to vote Labor, or some of those people would have. Some live in blue ribbon Liberal seats, which are now teal seats in Australia. But pretty much, I would say they've alienated the whole Jewish vote in Australia. It's a lot smaller, obviously, than the Middle Eastern Arab vote. But nonetheless, I would suggest they've probably alienated most of it. It's been very difficult for this government to say anything positive about Israel and what's going on. But what the foreign minister has done ultimately is sort of say, look, it's okay to reward terrorists, even though she says Hamas cannot be part of a future government of a Palestinian state. It's pretty much rewarding terrorists for killing 1,200 Jews on October 7th last year. And it ain't great. Not a great look for Australia.
Now, this sticks in my throat a little bit, Craig, I have to confess. But something that the Australians are much better at than us Kiwis is the Christian lobby. I suppose having a Christian voice which actually influences government policy, and the Australian Christian lobby well, putting the government under a bit of pressure when it comes to uh, interventionist medical treatments for young people that are perhaps thinking that they're a different gender than the one that they were born.
Yep.
Of course, there's been a bit of a turnaround in the UK on these sorts of policies.
That's right. Yeah, so with the Tavistock Institute in the UK, we saw a turnaround in terms of these policies, and there's a lot more. Actually, it's not just the Australian Christian Lobby, although they're doing a great job of pushing from their side, but the real push is coming from the medical community itself. There are lots of doctors, groups of doctors who are saying, hey, look, this is not great what's happening. So let me give you a little bit of information about that. I mean, the Prime Minister's obviously coming under pressure on this front to do something like a review, like's been done in the UK,
Yep.
for medical treatments that are enabling kids and younger adults to transition, which means obviously taking a lot of chemicals to allow that process to occur, but puberty blockers, etc.
Yeah.
But this
is HRT for children, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's real alarm with it, because what we're beginning to realize is this is serious long-term damage to their bodies and their physical health. And so the Australian Christian Lobby they've called for a stop to the medicalisation of children. And also, obviously, the medical community itself is starting to throw up its arms and say, hey, we can see the damage it's doing to the bone structure of kids and young people. And then we're realising that 75% of kids that actually take this program on board are actually saying stop later themselves. And one of the reasons is because they've realized that the gender dysphoria they're feeling, or their identity issues that they're feeling, are not coming from a genuine biological cause, a genuine reality, but actually are coming from some other things that are happening in their lives. So 70% is a big number for kids who are putting up their hand going, actually, I want to stop taking these drugs.
Yeah.
And so the Prime Minister is coming under pressure to have a look at this. Obviously, there is a very powerful lobby on the other side that's pushing the other way.
Including within the Australian medical community as well. I mean, I think you sent me the link for this, but there was an Australian documentary. There's quite a lot of at least a community, a subculture within the Australian medical community that are very much in favour of this and are pretty prepared to double down on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be a major tug of war. But look, what's the first rule of medicine? Do no harm. And the fact is that in the name of wanting to help these kids with identity issues, we're doing a lot of harm to their bodies in the process. And a lot of kids are recognising that themselves, and a lot of doctors are recognising it. So the Prime Minister's coming under pressure to sort that issue out.
Now, just want to have some good news in amongst it, because, just want to bring a smile to your face, Craig.
I've been the bearer of bad news so many times.
Your choice to live in Australia, just saying. But a good news story to do with Magpies, and I'm not talking about the NRL team in this instance. Now, Magpies are a bit of a pest on this side of the Tasman, but they're a treasured national bird in Australia, aren't they?
They're like all Aussies, the most intelligent beings going around. They're amazing. They recognise your faces, by the way. They recognise your face. If you're mean to them, they will attack you.
The other thing, though, yes, they are intelligent, but there's one particular magpie that thinks that they might be a dog.
That's it. He fell out of a tree when he was young. Can happen to anyone. And it ended up in a family in Queensland, and got to know the dog. It's a Staffordshire Terrier, so it's like one of those sort of dogs that looks really vicious. One of those ones. And turns out the dog is a complete cream puff. Made friends with the magpie, who turned out also to be a cream puff. He's male. His name is Molly.
Oh, okay.
And Molly thinks he's a dog. So he rolls around on his back. He likes his tummy scratched. He barks.
Oh, what?
He barks.
I mean, they're good mimickers, a magpie, aren't they? But a barking magpie. This is a new one.
Well, listen, I encourage anyone to go and have a look online at these two. They've got their own Instagram account. This is the funniest magpie you've ever met in your life. He barks just like a dog. But of course, the government couldn't let things go at that. They decided to take Molly the magpie away. What? Because you can't have a wild bird living with a family. Now it turns out the family he was wild. He was let loose. He left for the bush every day, but he came back home to their family house
because he wanted his tummy scratched, like a good Staffy.
He wanted his tummy scratched. What's wrong with that? What harm could that do? But of course, there are laws in Australia about keeping wild animals, and so they took. You know what they did? They took this bird away, who was actually free to leave anytime he liked, and they put him in captivity.
What?
That was what Wildlife Australia did with him. So finally the Premier of Queensland, who's on the nose with everybody, decided I better step in and get some votes because there was a massive outcry online to get this bird back to his family and his dog mate. And so the Premier stepped in and said, "Oh, we'll work out a special visa for him to be able to go, or a special license for Molly the Magpie to be able to go and live at his home again." So that's a victory for common sense, and it's a good news story for Australia.
I'm glad that there isn't some sort of veterinary lobby that are supporting Molly to not only change gender but change species.
He's transitioning to a wild magpie.
Craig, this is
he's a Staffordshire terrier trapped inside the body of a magpie.
Exactly. And it's a male magpie, but its name's Molly. So there's confusion all round, actually.
Yep. But what are his pronouns? What are his pronouns? Or hers, well, the pronoun.
Exactly. Barking, I think, are the pronouns for Molly.
Barking mad.
It is a fun story, and I do recommend, hey, look, if people Google Molly the Magpie, they'll no doubt find the video on this one. But hey, Craig, great to have some good news from the lucky country. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
God bless, mate. Look after yourself. Cheers.